On tonight's episode, Return of the Archons, a terrifying tale with mystery and mayhem.
You will be absorbed. The good is all. Landru is gentle. You will come.
We open with a suspenseful sequence depicting Sulu on this alien planet. Cloaked assailants approach him and spray him with this pipe. He then reaches the Enterprise in a disillusioned manner, babbling uncontrolled. He's been brainwashed. This sets up an interesting premise to further unfold.
Faraday. Lieutenant O'Neill, where is he? Faraday.
A search party then beams down to the alien planet looking for another missing crew member, and I like this use of historical sets here on this Paramount backlot. Alien costumes? Well, what if these aliens just wear 18th century human clothes? And what if these alien establishments are just 18th century buildings that we use for King Kong and Gone with the Wind? I mean, it's not very alien, but they were using what they had.
If everybody on this planet is like him, let's go.
The score does an amazing job of setting up the atmosphere here. There's this sick feeling hanging in the air. All of a sudden, the red hour begins and our narrative and tone shift into a state of mayhem. There's quick cuts in the editing, we get a lot of Dutch angles and some great work from all of these extras. Ah, that guy was just hit in the head by a styrofoam rock and kept on running. Our crew quickly flee the scene and we get some great expositional dialogue explaining some of the lore and mythology around this odd planet.
Are you Roger?
Yes.
You have a daughter named Tula.
Yes?
Well, you better do something. She's outside.
I know. It's festival. It's the will of Landru.
Kirk and crew then go about trying to understand this continuing escapade of extremism using science and observation.
Doctor, your atmospheric readings to determine whether there's anything in the air to account for all this. Mr. Lindstrom, correlate all that you've seen with any other sociological parallels, if any. Mr. Spock, you and I have some serious thinking to do.
For no discernible reason, at 6 a.m. the next morning, the riot just stops. We get this great shot of the soundstage with all these choreographed extras that is just executed perfectly. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, these cloaked figures from the beginning emerge again and murder some old guy. This time their pipe shoots sparks and kills him for disobeying Landru's law. It's an unexpected turn of events for sure. Kirk realizes that this society is run by these compulsory calls to action, being that everybody just does exactly what they're told when they're told. He realizes this and is able to undermine these cloaked assailants and diffuse their authority.
It is the law. You must come.
I said we're not going anywhere.
This story excels at setting up its tense atmosphere. It's also able to have this rich world that feels real and lived in, even though it's not particularly sci-fi and is just old sets from Gone with the Wind. We then get a great horror-inspired sequence dripping of suspense as our crew try to escape this possessed mob that's being controlled by the yet unseen leader, Landru.
Phasers on stun.
Kirk and crew manage to escape but are then confronted by this hologram of the yet unseen leader Landru. He uses these beams of power to try to pull the Enterprise out of orbit. This is a great storytelling element because we have tension on two sides, our crew on the ground and the rest of our crew in orbit.
Captain, we're under attack. There are heat beams of some kind coming up from the planet's surface.
Spock, Bones, Kirk, and the rest of the landing crew are then attacked by this hologram that releases this wave of high-frequency hertz, knocking them completely unconscious. Kirk is a powerful protagonist in this story. He deals with all the problems at hand with authority, with intelligence, and with competency. It's great to see a leader like him on screen.
You are holding my ship. I demand that you release it.
You have come to a world without hate.
Our captured crew is then introduced to a brainwashed Bones who's been caught in the spell of this ominous leader.
Don't you know me?
We all know one another. In Landru.
Sid Haig has an uncredited role in this episode. You might know him from the Rob Zombie films. He's also been in a whole other slew of low-budget sci-fi and horror films over the last 50 years. He died not long ago, but it's great to see him in this, even though you barely see his face and it's not his voice. It's just a little feeling of, oh, there he is, old Sid. Remember Sid? An undercover operative, in opposition to this conversion state, spares Spock and Kirk from being converted. He puts them in the machine and he makes it seem as if they're going to be brainwashed, but he spares them. Now they have to pretend they're under this spell and infiltrate the society and figure out what is going on and who this leader is and why he's doing this to his people.
Have no fear, friend. The effect is harmless. My name is Marplon. I was too late to save your first two friends. They have been absorbed. Beware of them.
We get mention here of the Prime Directive for the first ever time in Trek, but its parameters seem to be a bit different from when it shows back up again in TNG. Kirk states that you can interfere in a species as long as their society isn't prosperous and moving forward. So they are able to interfere and meddle in this society because obviously they're not forward moving and prosperous and doing well. They're being controlled by some unknown entity.
Landru must die.
Captain, our prime directive of non-interference.
That refers to a living, growing culture. Do you think this one is?
The brainwashed Bones becomes aware that Kirk and Spock are not under the spell of Landru, and we get this intense performance from the great late DeForest Kelley. R.I.P. man.
You're not of the body.
Peace.
You're not.
To you,
You're
friend.
not of the body.
Joy and front.
Lawgivers! Peace. Lawgivers! Traitor!
Kirk and his analytical first mate then do some kung fu to these guards to retrieve their cloaks and infiltrate Landru's lair. It's TOS at its best, damn it. William Shatner doing kung fu. It's all we want to see. The tension tracks upwards as the Enterprise continues to be pulled to the ground, plummeting with all our beloved crew members aboard. This story is rather slow in its pacing, but it does slowly escalate as it goes along, and this ticking clock element just adds to the suspense at hand.
Mr. Spock, I've been trying to reach you.
Report, Scott.
The orbit's still decaying. Give it 6 hours more or less.
We finally get introduced to the real Landru in the third act of this story, and these suspenseful, tension-filled drums do a great job of building up the moment. The score is simply superb throughout this. Kirk and Spock fire down the wall and holy shit, it's revealed Landru's a computer! Now, I'm sure back in '66 that the reveal of Landru being this computer wouldn't have been a cliche or wouldn't have been an overused sci-fi trope. In fact, it might have originated here in this episode. I know it comes up in Futurama and endless other sci-fi programs. But it still works, even though it is a TOS cliche. I mean, that's why you're watching TOS, right? For all these great classic sci-fi moments with all these cheesy sets and props, and then some surprisingly highly intelligent, well-written scripts quite often.
Landru.
Machine. This whole society is a machine's concept of perfection. Peace, harmony.
But no so.
So in true Star Trek fashion, to wrap up this third act, we don't get an action sequence. No. Kirk and Spock argue with the computer about the definitions of life, sentience, intelligence, humanity, and the idea of a soul. It's simply amazing.
Without freedom of choice, there is no creativity. Without creativity, there is no life. A body dies. A fault is yours.
We get another amazing sci-fi cliche in this episode, which also might have originated here in this epic story. Kirk gets into this conversational loop with the computer and convinces it that it is void of humanity, so it catches on fire and explodes. I know that trope has also popped up in Futurama a whole lot. You can argue all the robots in that show to the point of contradicting themselves so their heads explodes, but even though it's not original anymore, it still works. It's still a great ending, and like I said, you're watching it for these great cliched moments, which weren't in '66 presumably, which were original and surprising 55 years ago, theoretically. So the story wraps up. Our crew is saved, the brainwashed bones becomes released, the Enterprise does not crash into the surface of the planet, and we do actually get some expositional dialogue explaining that they sent people down to help this society move into a new phase without this tyrannical dictator controlling it. So they didn't just completely meddle in this society, fuck it up, kill its leader, and then leave them all to fend for themselves and go nuts. They did actually put in place a team to help this society transition to their next stage of evolution. So that's good. They're not complete assholes in this like SG-1. Fucking SG-1.
Well, Mark, you're on your own now. I hope you're up to it.
In conclusion, this story is great. It's a bit of a slow burn pacing-wise, but it does slowly etch up in suspense. I like the sets and the costumes and how they're just 18th century Earth sets and costumes that they had laying around at the Paramount lot. That's fucking brilliant. And like I said, there's a lot of classic tropes and sci-fi concepts here that pop up, which are so familiar to the zeitgeist now that it just shows how influential the Star Trek, the original series, was on not just science fiction in general, but just stories and television and narrative in general. It's echoed through all of television and all of storytelling for the last 55 plus years, and it's great. It's cheesy and it's silly, but it's also amazing and it's far better written than a lot of modern shows on television. So if you haven't watched it, give it a go. Alright, thank you all for watching. It really help out if you guys could like, subscribe, and in the comments tell me I got all the facts wrong and my opinion is null and void. Thank you and good night.